everyone, and welcome to our next episode. I hope you heard the fabulous jingle there. Um, I am Sam Eaton, and I would like to introduce my fabulous colleagues either side of me, Toby and Callie. Toby, why don't you say hi and introduce yourself briefly?
Hello, my name's Toby. I am a fourth-time attendee of HR Breakfast USA because this is our fourth episode. Yeah, and I just do a bit of employee experience stuff. Really, that's my jam. What about you, Callie?
Yeah, Callie Adamson Bakken. This is also my fourth episode. HR background focusing more on organizational health and how a great employee experience makes a more profitable employee experience.
Loving this. And I'm with these fabulous human beings. I'm Sam Eaton. I'm the founder of Mindability. We are business coaches for the HR and people related community, and we will help you build your business on your terms so you never go back to corporate. I'm just saying. And that face is pulled every time because I try to maintain my enthusiasm for doing it. The whole purpose of this show is we came together, one, because we all get on so well, but we wanted to talk about the real stuff in HR. And this week, and I can't remember, it was either Toby or Callie who came up with this, but it was ingenious. Inspired turnover. Oh, Callie, well done.
I don't know if I
Inspired
actually
turnover.
made up the term, but I think I don't know that I've heard anyone else use it. So I'm going to say that I coined the phrase inspired turnover.
TM.
Okay, trademark lawyers. So this is all about giving someone the skills to grow up, right? How often have we had this conversation that actually we want some of the larger organizations, when they're interviewing people and bringing them on, to actually say, hey, where do you want to go with your career and how can we be part of it? Growing up doesn't necessarily mean you've got to stay in an organization. It might mean you go and come back. Let's talk about it. Why aren't companies doing this? Toby.
Do you want the Toby answer or
Yes,
a
I do,
a
please.
constructive
Thank you.
answer? Because they're silly billies. Because they're not very good at what they do. No, serious answer. Well, that has been part of the serious answer. It's a slam dunk. It's a win. It's an easy win to do that, but most companies don't because the business strategy is formed because it needs to help the business survive and grow and develop, and therefore everything that feeds off of that is to support the business strategy. So that even goes down to individuals' development. It's like, okay, how do these individuals act and perform and think for the benefit of the business strategy? And completely disregards the human element. Now, great leaders, this is an aside, like great leaders obviously will help massage that into a blend of business strategy and personal development. But the worst leaders will kind of go, okay, well, let's just enact what kind of this top-down thinking, what's being asked. And I think it's two things, right? The ability for a leader to either translate the business strategy into individual goals. Now, that's pretty hard to do because I'll be honest, in every company I've worked for, my personal development goals have never aligned with the business growth strategy. That just wouldn't make sense. So it's being comfortable enough and adult enough to have that conversation about, well, where do you want to go? And I think to the title of the show is like, that can be away from the organization. And we'll talk about how that could pay back in, after that step. But Callie, what are you thinking about this topic?
Yeah, well, I think, the old overused analogy of they're like, why would we spend money on personal development if they're just going to leave the organization? But what if they stay? That whole thing, I think, is just so narrow and undersighted of one, you want your employee population to see that there are opportunities for advancement. You are not always going to have the right position open at the right time for that awesome employee or even mediocre employee. It doesn't really matter. And so people being able to see not only is there a path forward within the organization, but there's a path forward because it's recognized that I gained valuable skills here. Everyone benefits from that. Also, if we're talking about employer brand and what the rest of the community thinks about you, your reputation will precede you if you have great employees that go out into the world and are better employees for the experience they had with your organization.
Yeah, and I think part of this is we're talking about people leaving, right? And how we stay connected with them in order for them to come back. personally, I don't think there's enough conversation around great alumni. And, you know, love them or hate them, 20, maybe a few years ago, when I first started out in Goldman Sachs, they were just starting out with their alumni then. And actually bring it, fast forward to where we are today, it is a really enriched environment where, there are events, there are think tanks, there are all sorts of things that happen. It also means that when those great people who leave and perhaps want to come back, why would you? They've got them in the network, right? They know them. Why isn't more being done with alumni, or have I missed the point in part of this inspired turnover?
I think it goes back to what we talked about 2 episodes ago, or maybe the first episode, like defining what employee experience is, or what HR's role in employee experience is, or what is the length of a relationship between employer and employee. And more often than not, it's from the moment like they apply for a job, from the moment they have left. And with some organizations, even before they've left, it's like they can cut the apron strings a couple of weeks before they leave, and you kind of just have people burning time down doing nothing. But when you think like that, the only place you're ever going to get to is aligning an individual's performance with business strategy, because that is the relationship, right? But if you extend it way beyond, if we go at the beginning, from the moment someone follows that organization on social media to the moment they stop following that organization on social media, as an example, well, all of a sudden you are kind of holding yourself to account. How do those people think, feel, and what they do as a result before they join and after they join the company? And let's focus on, because we're talking about the inspired turnover, right? That when someone leaves an organization, I'm doing some really great hand gestures here and they're getting missed out. So I'll just bring it over here. When someone leaves an organization, there's kind of 4 things. Here we go. 4 things that could happen if they leave as an advocate or a part of an alumni network. They could return additional sales because they're recommending people shop or buy your products and services. They could recommend that their network go and even work there. They might even go on somewhere that would be an ideal partner for that organization. Or the 4th one, they might come back and, to your point, Sam, they might even go back and work there with additional skills and experience they didn't otherwise have.
Yeah.
So those 4 things alone make it incredibly valuable to inspire the turnover that happens at that organization, because it will pay back commercially. And I think the blind spot of most organizations, and this isn't just HR, this is just most companies, is like, well, we're a great company, and if they leave, they'll think we're great, regardless of how that relationship ended. That's kind of not true at all. Like, everyone remembers the last touch point they had with that organization, probably doesn't remember a lot of the middle bits, and probably remembers the beginning bit. So what are they doing? And it relates to customer experience, right? It's like, it's got to be done with intent. So you make them, if you can, evangelical about your organization once they've left. If you can do that and measure that, that's gold.
Kelly.
You nailed it. We can stop early. Also, I want to go back to the fact that you're like, I think it was the first episode, maybe the second. Like, we're on episode 4 and we're already like, hey, when did we talk about that? I love it. Super great. No, I agree completely. I think the employer branding side of things, and forgetting that your best friend or your worst enemy is your past employee out in the market talking about you, especially if it's someone that you wish you would have been able to retain because they're likely a rock star and other people see that, which means that their opinion carries even more weight than the average person. And so not making an intentional effort to keep a hook in them and make sure that from the moment they tell you they are leaving until they start that next place, that you have intentionally made sure that it's a good parting experience.
And I often go back to that story where JFK visited NASA and he went round to see all the astronauts, right? He had a conversation with everyone and he stopped the janitor and said, "What's your role here? What are you doing?" And his response was along the lines of, "I'm helping get the first team to the moon." There was something really special. We all heard this tales of NASA, right? We've all seen the films. but there was something very special about that one quote from someone who could so easily have felt disconnected. And that inspired turnover with someone like that. I've no idea what happened to the guy or where he went, but that empowerment that he would have left that organization with, and let's hope he still did, is something that very few organizations seem to get right. Smaller ones, it's easier, right? And I think that's the other thing we need to call. It's easier for the SME market or the SMB market, however you call them, to be able to get it right in terms of that inspired turnover because there are less people. Why don't they?
I was going to say, but I think the problem is that you're too close to it at that point and you take it too personally. So not only are they breaking ties with the organization, but they're breaking up with me because there must be something wrong with me. And, you know, as we all need a reminder once in a while, it's not about you. It rarely
Yeah.
is.
I think there's a cool opportunity here. So anybody who's watching in chat or in the comments, I'd like you to just think about your last employer, and on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely would you recommend friends and family go and work in that organization? So we're not going to go and look at your LinkedIn profile and figure out who that score is for, but like, or any previous employer, right? You can make it so anonymous, but like, just think of an employer and what is on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend them to friends and family or your network, right? As an employer, be really interesting to see what that figure is, because that's kind of that's the hallmark. Like if it's 10, or if we're on NPS measurement, if we're getting to 100, fantastic. But actually, if we're in the negatives, then there's definitely work to do. But no employer 8. That's a promoter. Great stuff. But what no employer is doing is not measuring that, like beyond once they've left. So they might measure NPS, or they just might not even do it at all. But what they'll do is they'll kind of try and measure these singular interventions whilst they're at the company, rather than holistically, what is the net promoter score of our organization before, during, and after. Most will just focus on during, right? And it's got to be done before and after, and you understand the impact your company is having on those individuals that you employ. It has to be measured.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think a great barometer is how the HR department's treated, right? And the sad reality is, I absolutely get it from 2020. Of course we do. Everything that happened, and then 2021 and 2022. But why on earth in 2023 were people feeling they had no choice but to go? So this whole inspired turnover piece was just missed. And I guess with that kind of context in mind, what small things can companies do to turn it around other than asking the interview? How can we partner here so you help us and we help you? What are the small steps we need to take, Callie?
We need to talk about it. We need to recognize that the average employee tenure is like 4 years if we're lucky at this point. And we need to frame conversations around, we would love to create an experience that makes sense for you to stick around longer, but we recognize that that doesn't always make sense, especially not with how the workforce is structured these days. And so we want to make sure that you are most engaged by giving you tools and resources that make you feel like you're growing and developing in whatever ways that you want to, so that we're leaving you better than you found us. And we're hoping that you are leaving us better than you found us too.
I love it. Toby.
I kind of forgot the question. I had a really good idea a second ago. It literally just flew off out that window, and I'm like, "Where's that thought gone?" Because it has disappeared into the middle of nowhere. Was it measuring stuff? What was it? Go on, say again.
So how do we? What small steps can we take to?
That was it. I got it. It's flown back. It's come back through the window. I've got it. So I worked with a company a couple of years ago that one of the. It's really interesting. Like, they asked every employee like what their hopes and dreams were. Like, what did they Why did they come to work? What was the purpose? Which is really great. But then they did nothing with that information. It was just like, okay, cool. We're going to help you get the very best out of you for the sake of this company. It's like, you came so close to being able to have great development conversations, because like you could have framed every single thing that I was doing in that organization to meet where I wanted to get to, which wasn't necessarily to be at that company for a long time, to your point, Callie, or anything like that. It was to evaluate, what I wanted to do and what experience and value was I going to get out of the organization to help me along that way. Now, as a result, I look back at that company and go, were they a key step on me getting to where I am today? They probably held me back in some regard, right? So because everything I was doing was for their value, not for my own. And it's not that I'm not saying like, all the value an organization needs to deliver is for its employees. It's got to be two-way. But we live in a world where it's one way at the moment. Like every employer is measuring how much they get out of their employees, but no one's measuring how much they give back. And what the balance of that is really key.
I know when we started talking about starting this show, one of the examples I brought up is Ira Glass, who created This American Life, which is one of the most successful podcasts. And it's, syndicate radio, so you can hear it every weekend. And one of the things Ira Glass talks about when he's doing live performances is that someone told me early on that the more fun you're having, the more likely you are to succeed. And so his career is built on this idea that if I'm having fun, I'm enjoying the experience, I'm feeling like I'm getting something out of it, it's probably going to be successful. And that has worked really, really well for his career with developing things that are widely applicable, because he felt the ownership in an investment in, I want to make something good that I would enjoy, and clearly hit the mark right on the head.
Yeah. And do you know what? Sometimes I do wonder in sort of the early hours of the morning that, are we overcomplicating this? Does it have to be this hard?
Yeah, I agree with Callie. No, it doesn't have to be this hard.
Yeah.
Cool. Next question.
We overcomplicate everything. I mean, especially with HR, right? It's like, if it's not complicated, if there's not 10 steps, you're not doing it right. It's like, well.
But then who makes that complicated? I don't think it's HR that makes it complicated.
I disagree. I think HR makes it vastly complicated because they try and build something that, like, to try and forge a brand new path within the organization with a new approach is quite difficult, right? Especially if that company's been around for a while and it's got a legacy of how human resources interact with that organization in the past. So you can do two things in that situation. You can stick with the status quo, or you can change. And what we're discussing here is that a change needs to happen.
Yes.
But most HR teams that I've worked with are kind of really risk adverse, because it's like, well, I don't want to change because there's a risk. And it's like, actually, there's really much less risk than you anticipate, because people have such a low opinion of HR at the moment that you can pretty much do anything you want. So it's to be brave and bold and act change with how your HR function works with your company. And it's not to seen it so many times to sit there and think about how you might do it. You've just got to start, because if you haven't already started, you're already behind, right? There are smaller to medium business out there that are going to be the larger companies in 10 years that are already getting this right. Mm-hmm. So you've kind of got to start now. I think the other thing is to simplify it. Is like, none of this stuff is new. Like the approach to treat employees in the regard that we're talking to create inspired turnover is about treating them like customers. And guess what? Most companies have customers. So imagine if you had loads of insight about how customers were being treated your organization, and you could learn from them and apply it to the employee experience. That's why it's that easy. And that's why I firmly believe it sits in HR's camp to change it, to be honest.
And I guess in a way, I'm disagreeing with you and agreeing with you, in that I do see, and I've always said that, the HR folks and, the consultants and the people I work with are at the forefront of the workplace, not police, place people. Hit my head on Friday. Toby will tell you. It's actually an evolution, not a revolution. So just be bold. And if the people around you aren't going to listen, then the question is, are you part of the inspired turnover and you go somewhere that will? Because basically that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, like I think we're at a stage at the moment where the change that needs to happen, we're in the kind of early adopter phase, really, and this is why it's the smaller, more agile HR teams out there are kind of doing new things because they can. But if you start applying this thinking to a large organization that has a recruitment team, a learning and development team, someone who looks after employee benefits, an employer brand team, all of a sudden you've created this massive system that requires not only a lot of human capital to change, so you've got to move the people around and reshape how they're working, but you've also got to do that in the tech stack as well. And all of a sudden, you kind of go, you know what? It's really and I'm not going to say it's easy. That is difficult, but you've got to do it at some time. And to just keep kicking it down the line is like, well, it's like typical like politician or CEO mentality, right? It's like, see myself through this 3 years, and I'll just go and move somewhere else. And it's like I could just make enough incremental change to get myself better. Doesn't really do anyone any benefit because you're like, well, what change are you really going to enact in that 3-year period if you're just looking at making incremental gains to a model that already exists? So it's at the moment, the people I'm seeing are the braver ones that are willing to like really push forward and strive a new path that are doing this really, really well. But like I say, for the larger companies, it is hard. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that, to unpick all that politics is easy. But it's kind of like, well, you either do it or you just don't exist.
There is a very short amount of time before I think we get from the earlier adopter phase to needing to do it. And I've been on so many conversations lately talking about just Gen Z's inability to put up with BS for greater gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they just learned early the whole idea of like cut your losses early, find the right place to be or the place that feels like you're growing, which not that that's like totally the best approach, right? There are shortcomings to it as well, but it's going to be even more of a revolving door than what we've seen here if we don't figure out how to get it right and give them an experience that doesn't have them tapping out saying bye during training. Like, I don't know. I've seen several videos on TikTok of people recording. They're like, yeah, I'm not coming back for day 2. Like, what? But I think that that's just becoming more of a thing with how, there's a lot of dynamics that they've put up with. And they're like, I'm finally in the driver's seat. I'm not going to put up with it anymore. And so we need to figure it out quickly.
So I was telling someone the other day about the film Office Space. If you haven't watched Office Space, watch it because not a lot's changed in 25 years. That film came out in 1999 from the two Bobs, right? The two Bobs who are evaluating why. What's the main guy's name? I can't remember, but why he's not performing is just like, I don't care anymore. Like, and it actually turns out being the guy who gives all the insight and gets rid of his leaders and all that kind of stuff. But the real thing that kind of has changed from generation to generation is like the thoughts are not new. The thoughts aren't new. Everyone's thought like this for a long time. But the difference is to your point, Callie, is the action. Mm-hmm. Generations are now going to take action against this. And it's like, well, I can. Like, because if I do it, what is the worst case scenario? I could probably find another job. Like, and this is where it becomes a race for talent. This is where that relationship is shifting. That if you as an employer don't give me what I want in any percentage, then I'm going to leave and go and find someone who does. Because guess what? There probably is someone that will. But also, they probably will do it with the anticipation that you're not going to be here for the rest of your life. You're not going to be here for double-digit years. So we can also give you what you want and also appreciate that at some point you're going to leave and not try and dig our claws in and keep you in for absolutely ever. Because we're not really concerned about attrition as just a number, but we're concerned about quality attrition. So like how many people are leaving with a really high regard for our organization. Now, when you start measuring that, now you're onto something. You start measuring the thing that you really should be inspired. No, I've already ruined it. It's the trademark, isn't it? It's inspiring. I forgot. Inspiring turnover. You want to create inspiring turnover for your organization, but you can't just say it. You have to be able to measure it and then do things that affect that change.
Yeah. And, you know, there are larger organizations out there already that encourage entrepreneurialism outside of work skills, and they will fund them. You know, there are organizations already who are saying, okay, you got a good business idea, bring it. We'll give you $1,000. And if it takes off, you go run that business, we'll buy it, we'll buy it and we'll bring you back in. To me, that is a classic golden opportunity for those who want to do something different and to be heard, to go into a large organization knowing that actually there are opportunities. I think that's brave. I think that's bold, and love to see more companies do it.
100%.
I think it dispels, because there's that whole concept of entrepreneurship, which is just like such a stupid concept.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, oh yeah, we want the entrepreneurial spirit inside our organization. It's like, cool, that's pretty much impossible, because you're almost like undoing what an entrepreneur is. But in the model you've just talked about, Sam, you're enabling them to make the gains that an entrepreneur would in the way they would, rather than go, oh, what's the best idea I can come up with that makes the most money for my employer? Like, no one wakes up, unless the organization's absolutely fantastic, and I'd love to hear from them. No one wakes up thinking like that. Everyone thinks, how am I going to get to Friday? How am I going to get to the end of the month, the end of the year?
Yeah.
How am I going to survive my performance review? And, I'll get the standard, I'm performing, no one exceeds expectations, because that's the game of the system. But the other thing is that the thing that accelerates this, as well as the generational trends, is social media, right? The Glassdoor and TikTok and everything is just so much more visible now. So organizations don't have anything to hide behind. Whereas like in the 80s and 90s, you could kind of hide behind it and treat everyone a little bit rubbish, because you're like, well, I bet every organization's like this, isn't it? And it's like, oh, actually, no, it's not. And like, all you have to do is go and watch some TikToks to see that it isn't. And that also, to be honest with you, there are people taking the mickey, I was going to swear then, absolutely taking a mickey out of organizations who treat employees like they are in the 90s. Like, and it's like, I just love to get some of those in front of CROs, CRHs, and go, look, the social media is laughing at how you're running your company. Do you not see that as a critical problem? You probably should.
Exactly. And the whole point that we have social media, and again, I think part of this inspired turnover, is encouraging your staff to invest in their own personal network.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to have a strong personal network because it helps us as an organization. And that, I think, is one of the steps that I am seeing with progressive organizations who is saying, yes, you go out there, we'll help you with your social media. Love that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am very conscious of time. We've spoken about great films. We've spoken about the fact that actually we can simplify this. And I think the strapline, just do it. There are other brands that use that, obviously.
TM. So we've had inspiring turnover, TM, and just do it. I think there may be a TM on there for a completely different reason.
Yes. But we will take the inspired turnover. Last words and thoughts from you, Toby.
I think you nailed it with just do it. It's like you just have to do it. There you go. I've just made it longer. I've taken a snappy trademark and I've made it longer. You've just got to do it.
You just got to do it. Callie.
You never know when it will come back, and you'll be thankful that you did.
Love that.
That's way better than what I said. I'm gonna just.
I just tacked on to yours. That's all I did.
And I guess for me, it's be inspired by what you want to achieve, and don't lose sight of that. Slightly longer, so taking what you both said and just doubled it and just spewed more words. And on that note, I appreciate we are running late, everybody. But thank you so much for listening and staying with us. Do send us your ideas and suggestions on what other topics you'd like us to carve up, dissect and destroy. we can do this. But in all seriousness, there are things that we need to talk about. Let us know, and we'll talk about it next session. See you next week, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.